1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, I'm gonna, leave that to David now. So David, would you like to take on from here?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Have we got everybody at the moment coming into the room, I assume?
Yes, I'm gonna let people in
As
as
they come.
we go, and the meeting is recorded. So if anyone wants to go back to the meeting and see what they have missed, they can do it. So yes.
Right. Wonderful. Anyway, thank you so much for coming along to this brief introduction to Alchemy, and also it's wonderful that we've got a couple of the members of the first cohort. So Alchemy is something which has been developed over about 5 years, but was kind of road tested for the first time with our first group in Athens last summer, and we felt very successful, and so we're going to do it again in Athens a slightly earlier time, but basically the same period of 6 weeks. And it basically is a very practical framework of skills and I suppose techniques which help people to make first off devised theatre, but devised theatre from their personal standpoint, growing them as artists. But also it's a tool, the creative practice that we'll talk about later is a tool which you can use in all sorts of work areas. In fact, it grew out of a centre I set up in Cambodia called the Centre for Creative Development, and it really takes creativity into 5 parts. Each of these parts have sort of modes and techniques and skills, but it has also been recently used at the UN in creative leadership. So it's been used in many different environments, often nothing to do with theatre. So it's actually a creative practice which helps people to be creative. But in this instance, we're bringing it back into theatre very much. And so it's an intensive workshop, which I'll talk in more detail about. And also then at the end of it, if you have any questions that you want to ask about the more practical sides of it, or the more the actual skills that we'll be learning, I'm very happy to go into more detail. So maybe if I could, because Alice is here all the way from Australia, from Melbourne, is that right, Alice? At the moment? Yeah. And you went through the training, as it were, for 6 weeks. Do you want to talk a little bit about it, and maybe how what you found you were learning from it, and also how it's maybe helped you now in your life in Australia?
Absolutely, yeah. Dive in. It was brilliant. First and foremost, the experience of being in that training environment for the 6-week period gave it that length of time to be able to dive in and put things into practice. We did have an opportunity at the end to, probably from around like week 3 or so through to week 6, to actually work towards a performance in process. So we got to actually apply the things that we were learning, which was a great experience to be able to do that it wasn't just here's lots of tools and now go by yourself and apply them all. There was that opportunity to be able to do that. The people were lovely. Your hosts really like do take good care of you, so you're in good hands. David's a brilliant teacher, very generous, and so you're going to be getting your money's worth in terms of people's time and what they're offering, and in how it's then continued to help me as an artist and human. I came to refine a lot more of what my artistic practice is about. Gave me a big boost of confidence, particularly after the pandemic isolation time and my experience of it. And wrote lots of grants afterwards, and just lots of the I've got a bouncy ball here because I'm going into lots of theory, so I need to keep moving. So the language I'm finding I'm using on an everyday kind of basis, and the learnings, and they're still very much present and alive in my body, both as a performer of sort of articulating what projects I want to do, but also with my work in therapy as well, and kind of bringing those together. So, and in making big life choices as well. So it's applicable not just within your creative practice, but there's also this.
Alice,
yes.
Sorry, it's interesting because you mentioned therapy. Your interest is obviously in drama therapy anyway. How do you see the work relating in that way to or the idea of alchemy? How did it feed, or does it, in the territory of your interest there?
It partly confirmed for me the link between the well-being and mental health of artists, of the work that we do, is so experiential in terms of working with our body, and that our body, knowing that our body can hold and store trauma or just lived experiences, and wanting to be able to provide artists with opportunities to become more conscious of the work that we do, so that we can penetrate it in a way that that gives us a real sense of ownership. So there was lots of challenges that I was able to meet and articulate within the space. So it just drove me even further into wanting to nut out how to keep the artistic, deep, passionate kind of work alive, and reframing what this idea of safety is, that safety doesn't mean that it's washed away, the darkness isn't washed away, but can still give a solid sort of framework. Just give me stuff to play with and bounce off and try articulate what the fuck I'm doing.
Great. Thank you, Alice. That's really great. It's very interesting to have what I found with the different participants in the workshop. That what's very vital is the integrative learning that happens through it, and that happens in a number of ways. One is a regular reflective activity, which happens in the morning, which we call at the beginning called Navajo University, which integrates people's learning. So it's in fact a process that's constantly reintegrating the learning of what everyone's doing, but also their experience, because you've got a lot of knowledge in the room from different places. I think that's really key. And so including that rather than excluding it from the room is a very important part of it. Absolutely. Maybe Claire, if you're there. Thank you, Alice. If you want to leave, Alice, please feel free to stay, but I know it's late in Australia for you, so please stay as long as you wish. It's been great seeing you again. Claire?
Claire's saying something. I'm not sure she's able to speak, maybe. I think she's in another scenario. Alice has put the experience so succinctly and beautifully, I cannot add much more, but only reinforce what Alice has already expressed. It's an experience, tools that stay with you and in all walks of life as an artist and the world around you. Claire Malka, 2022. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
I suppose I could give some sense of it, having
Simon, before you say something, we have Lydia with us. I don't know, Lydia, can you hear us?
Is she there?
That's all right, Claire. Lydia, can you hear us? Maybe not. Okay, Simon, sorry. Lydia, yes.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
Hello.
yes. Sorry, I didn't realize I'm on the phone. I didn't. I can hear everything and I can see you. I found some Wi-Fi.
Okay,
yes.
Welcome Switzerland. Come on.
Yes. What was the question? Was it there a question?
Your experience of doing alchemy yourself, and how it's during it a little bit, what you learned from it a bit, and also how you might be using it in your life now, in your work.
Okay, so it was a very, of course, intense time, and let me think. Maybe I just jumped to the part where the second question, like how I try to integrate all that I've learned in the life right now that I'm doing, and I have to say I haven't done anything for stage or writing or theater in the last 4 months, and I really miss it, and I feel like I'm back in another universe, like this regular universe where you deal with people, especially here in Switzerland, that just earn a lot of money and they have regular jobs, and they have, they buy these things that you need to buy in order to get happy and all that stuff. And I'm there in between. So at the moment, I'm doing a documentary about the very rich person. And it has been really tough for me to digest the wealth that I'm witnessing. I flew private jet, for example, something, so really rich people. And I'm thinking about this alchemy and all the lessons that we've learned there. And I'm thinking a lot about my book that I wrote after the workshop, to put all together in one file, so that I have a physical book of it, because I don't trust enough my physical experience of the workshop, probably. But it has been difficult to integrate what I learned in the alchemy workshop, although I know that it's there. But then dealing with these kind of people that I just mentioned, I feel that it has to come at a later stage where I have time to reflect, because once you're in this process of, for example, shooting this documentary that I'm doing right now, there's like, it has been, there's not enough time to reflect about what I'm doing, actually. So I felt like I was catapulted from one universe with the Navajo University and talking and, all the things that you said, David. And now I feel like I'm back in this other life here. And to be honest, it was too difficult to integrate it at the moment. I mean, I will finish this film in a month or so, and I hope that I can reflect about all of it and doing my upcoming work through the eyes of this alchemy eyes, like all that I've learned. But so far it has been really difficult, I have to say.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it points to something. Thanks, Lydia. I think it points to something, which is really, we've got kind of two models of doing things. And I found this when I did the training at the UN, is a very mechanistic, systems-based process, which is why people are getting burnt out. And the process around alchemy is a much more holistic one, which follows 5 stages that you will find also in nature, which is a creative process that includes many different things into it. And we'll talk through that in a minute. But it's very interesting. I was talking to a friend who is working in the area of burnout around people. And the more people work in this more mechanistic model that you're talking about, Lydia, the more burnout is happening at all levels, because basically it isn't taking into account the organic nature of life. It creates a model, and it's basically a model around efficiency, money and efficiency, and so on. And so what I hope with alchemy is we're presenting a very real alternative framework for creativity, which in the end will be ultimately more efficient, but requires investment at things like preparation and reflection, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it's very interesting what you're saying. Absolutely. For my money, the model that you're on at the moment is going to die very soon. It's actually running itself off the cliff in so many ways. So yeah, very interesting.
I hope.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So what I was going to say is, Claire, thank you for your comment. Maybe I'll talk a little bit now about the actual practice, the framework. It's basically the centerpiece is the 5-stage creative practice, which is the first part is preparation. And preparation basically has a few very simple elements. The first one is creating a secure environment to move to insecurity, though, not to remain in security. And so, in other words, as you begin to climb up Everest, you get more and more used to higher altitudes. That becomes your new security. We don't stay in security to remain secure. The second one is lowering judgment to an appropriate level. Some of the area that Lydia is probably talking about, one of the most difficult things is the world is full of constant judgment, most of it inappropriate most of the time. And so to be creative, you have to feel a lowering of that judgment to what I would call the appropriate level. And this is often about quieting the voices in our minds about whether I'm important, not important, am I making sense, not making sense. And that takes regular practice, in fact, to lower that judgment. Learning to give and receive rather than take and send. You know, when I first started at the UN teaching, they sent me this contract that said, you will deliver a workshop. I said, I'm not a postman, I don't deliver, I give workshops, people receive them. I receive their wisdom and so forth, you know. And so learning to give and receive is something we've lost, and it's one of the reasons people are burnt out, because we're not selling each other products. We're actually human beings giving and receiving. And so there's a lot of work on that, learning to give and receive. And then a very, very important area, which is probably the most serious thing about at all, is play. Is learning to play. And I don't mean just simply the frivolity of play. Play is a very deep thing. In fact, if you study play, you'll find that play is we learn fastest, and we also learn about the most complex things in life. So play in preparation, so learning to play again. The 5th stage, going backwards in the circle of the thing, is reflection. And reflection is a very large thing. And there is formal reflection, informal reflection. Every day we do reflection in the training, and also methodologies of reflection. So what I often ask people is I say, did you have a conversation with a loved one after the workshop? Because the conversations you have with family-like people go to a much deeper level. What was the conversation you had? Any images that stood in your mind, we do not think in words. In fact, we think in pictures. So any imagery there, any images that came up to you, any synchronicities, any things that suddenly stood out for you that were surprising, that didn't quite make sense, but stood out for you. In other words, when you begin to deal with synchronicity, and it's very appropriate that Lydia is from Switzerland, where Jung is from, which has influenced this, you will begin to actually use 95% of your brain rather than the very small amount that we're asked to use a lot of the time. And then dreams. The use of dreams and dream language as an area. This is not something special. This is very common to many, many indigenous communities around the world. But we do not trust our dreams anymore. But our dreams are actually a place where process is happening at a deep level. So that's reflection. There's also more straightforward reflection, which is, did you understand this? I understood this today. It's different from yesterday. So that's the 5th stage, but I always say that preparation and reflection are sort of bedfellows. It's through preparation, reflection, that everything else can happen. Without it, really, you have no trampoline for moving forward. The 2nd stage of creative practice is origination, and there's really only 2 aspects to that, although then because it's simple, it's not simplistic. I'll say that again, because it's simple, it's not simplistic though. One is saying yes and to things. It's being able to say yes and to things. And this is not some sort of new age kind of, oh, just everybody's very happy about what you're saying. It's actually understanding what affirmation of something is, because that's really what your cells are doing every moment, is yesing and then anding. What you will find is a lot of people in their life and in their work in society now, and the reason we have a lot of burnout is because you're basically getting yes, but. So it's going yes, no. In other words, that creates anxiety. One of the reasons we have rising levels of anxiety is you don't know where you stand, because you're getting yes, no at the same, or but. And so you might as well not say yes in the first place. So learning to say yes and again even if it's against even what you feel is counterintuitive, because your culture, the oxygen you breathe is often yes, but. So that takes time, again, regular practice to do that. And the other aspect of origination, and origination is really things that weren't there before suddenly appearing to be there, is what if then? And so what if is really a question. It's suggesting something. It's a conceit of going, what if I was king? And then the answer to that is then we would be creative every day. And then you take that, you put into a question is, what if I was creative every day? Then this. And this combines the imagination with the movement through time, which is how we live. So in a way, when people say an embodied imagination, what it really means is you think of things to do, and then you take action upon doing them. And in so doing, you begin to create your place in the world. And so combining yes and, which is a fundamental one, and then working on top of that, what if then? What if then is more complex in many ways, but it is actually at the very heart of certainly the artist's journey, the storyteller's journey, is what if then. So there's a lot of practice around those things in the first weeks. There's preparation, reflection, and then yes and what if. And it's a very rigorous, I think this is other things, I don't think people quite realize how rigorous it is to go through this and do it over and over again. In the same way that a dancer learns how to do a plie, doing these exercises in different ways is absolutely part of the training. So it's a training. The third part of creative practice is creative organization. And creative organization doesn't mean managing things. Okay, most things don't need to be managed. Your whole life is managed very simply without you thinking too much about it. It's really about finding the relationship between things. Creativity is the finding of relationship when there doesn't seem to be a relationship, in fact. And this is really rooted in some very simple thing, which is very important, which we do some work on, which is first seeing that everything in the universe is interesting if you spend time. What most of the time is we don't spend time on anything, so we generalize. But as soon as you look at anything, any given moment of anything around you, it becomes interesting. And so we do some work on critical thinking, which is what is something, how is it, and then why is it? But at a very, very specific level. When you begin to do that every day, you'll begin to see the relationship between the nature of things and the quality of those things. And again, this might sound a bit theoretical, but it's very simple. Is if you look at a ball, for instance, I've got here, and you begin to say, what is it? How is it? And then why is it? You'll begin to unpick how things exist in the world. And then when you go to your own ideas in a story, which is organization of ideas, you'll see how one relationship of one idea can sit next to another one, and that might have an appropriateness to it. This organizational stage is also then about finding commonality through, for instance, what we call constellations. Now, constellations, we know that really the stars aren't somebody pulling Sagittarius, pulling a bow, but for a moment we pretend they are. And this relates to synchronicity and also dreams. In other words, we see a pattern when we know there's no rational pattern there, but in so doing, it brings out what is happening inside of us rather than on the outside of the world. Seeing a story that we know doesn't exist in the outside world is the way that we create fiction, really. It's beginning to put those things, those patterns in from our mind. And that way of seeing, each of us is different. So also clustering, you'll see that certain ideas cluster around three main themes, which are the themes of our lives. And there's only three, really: death, love, and greed. That we all look for love. We all come out of a place of love. We all experience change, big time, called death. A lot of it happening at the moment, and greed. We want more of it. And these you find in something we're going to talk about in a minute, which is the child. The fundamental drive of the child is love, greed, and death. And working with these basic clusters of ideas that sit within that, whether it be Harry Potter is the story of love and death, and some greed in terms of Voldemort. So all of these things begin to find a place in these three basic drives of our life. And the last part, which is really important, and anybody that knows me, I hold quite high, I really respect the need for this, is story, is the use of story, how we tell stories. And we look at stories from a number of points of view, but in a very simple way, we look at it as a 3-act structure, which is a place, person, and a problem, and then follow that. And so again, the organizational stage is a very thorough and robust study in very real terms of trying these things out, and then applying those things to a piece of theatre at the end of it, devised theatre. The 4th stage of creative practice is manifestation. And manifestation is a really interesting thing. It almost seems magical. When I say manifestation as compared to outcome, people talk about outcome all the time, and basically they're believing in lies. There is no outcome. You die and the universe gets cold. It's very simple. There are no outcomes. It's just where you choose to stop in time. But what the manifestation does is that you get a sudden intensification of all the other stages that come together, usually in a short amount of time, in a condensed form. And the qualities that a manifestation has is that all the bits that went up to make the manifestation, it doesn't look like those bits. So if you do a devising piece, you don't look at all the shouting and fuck off to each other all the time. You actually see a piece that doesn't look like those pieces. A better way of saying that, though, is a baby. A baby is made up of pizza, hamburgers, and cappuccinos, but it doesn't look like those things because it's been transformed. So it condenses all those things in time, and it becomes, for a moment, a baby. And the same with a piece of fiction or a painting or whatever else, this condensing. And that's almost magical. The other thing that's quite interesting about manifestation is when you experience it, it feels like it was always there. So in other words, the room you're in right now, you know, didn't exist at one time, but you can't believe it didn't. So there's a kind of a feeling of immortality, which is very interesting about manifestation as well. And the last quality of manifestation, which is really, really interesting, is that it condenses time. So in other words, you know that a film took a year to make, the film you're making at the moment, but when you see it, A, you don't think about that, but also the magic quality of all that condensed time creates what I call a liminal space between waking and sleeping. It's just like a dream. It suddenly condenses all of this information and story and feeling into something which all that time is suddenly condensed into a very, very small, almost like a black hole of time, which has a magical quality that is both sleeping and waking at the same time. And so these things are very important. To get that manifestation, one of the things we do a lot of is a meditation at the end, at the beginning of every day. And you begin to see the preparation of that meditation, active meditation, suddenly finds its place in the manifestation stage. So these 5 stages, preparation, origination, organization, manifestation, reflection, is really a circle. And you're obviously, sometimes you're moving very quickly between them, literally in a minute. But we take it apart and look at it very carefully. And that, I'd say, is the basic discipline of doing that. So it's a framework which you can then go back to and look in your life and use it in different ways. The more you use those 5 stages, the richer it will be. But guess what? Going back to Alice's point, the happier you will get. If you only have a problem, organize it, manifest it, you'll get unhappier. The more you begin to use reflection, the more you begin to use preparation, learn to lower judgment, give and receive, and not move immediately to solving the problem, the more pleasure you get in the very act of making work. One of the great problems of arts at the moment is being defined by management structures that have nothing to do with art. You know, it doesn't make sense a lot of the time. So that's the framework. Then we look at you individually through 3 very important prisms. One of them, or optics, one of them is the child, which are the different phases of our life, very creative phases of our life. The child, the adolescent, and the elder. And the basic creative question of the child is, what is this? Because you're kind of experiencing it for the first time. And the extraordinary delight and terror that experiencing things that don't seem to make any sense has. But in that place, you will, become the next Frida Kahlo. You will experience life as if for the first time again at some level, and then play with that place in a constant state of rediscovery. And that is both beautiful, I think, delightful, and also terrifying. And you see these two emotions that very young children have. This is extraordinary, and this is fucking awful, painful. So this vividness. So what is this is the question. What is this? What is this? And it proves to us when we do the child that human beings by their nature are not cynical. Yeah, the world, and particularly the world we've created, creates cynicism, but nature doesn't understand cynicism at all. It just goes, this is amazing, and it's painful as well. The second part, the second exploration of you is adolescence. And the adolescence is a great corridor between childhood and having to be an adult. It is really the question of adolescence is not what is it? I know what it is now. It's how do I fit in or not? And so finding my tribe, finding my place in the world, finding my voice, realizing that there is great injustice and great stupidity in the world, and staying in that place emotionally is a very important part. So the movement into adolescence is a very different journey. Maybe some of the people who went through it will talk about how different from the child the adolescence is. But if you look carefully at all the great works of literature, for instance, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, you'll see the scream of an adolescent of saying how stupid and pointless everything is, or Kafka, or Virginia Woolf, with the great pain of becoming an adult and knowing that there will be an end to all this at some point, and the injustices of that. And so we explored that, but each in your own way. Each adolescent is different, it's not the same. The last part is the elder. And this is really the journey all the way through. All the people who come to this workshop are fairly experienced people. They've done a lot of work already. They have got a great deal of wisdom in them. And so the elder takes that wisdom and begins to recognize it, begins to look at it, begins to take care of it, and also not generalize it, take it apart. So as people know, I'm quite a great interrogator of people, what they say. It's not as judgment of them. It's more, let's have a look at all your wisdom and see how it works, the beauty of it, what you've learned from it. And so the elder is really happening all the time. It's happening this very moment as I speak. You're going, I see. I see what David's saying. I don't know what the fuck he's saying at this point. The elder is engaged. The other question of the elder is really all the time is what the fuck was that? This life? What was it? And then final one, which is very important and brings us back to the theme of death. How do I leave? Okay, how do I leave? Now, when I say leave, it doesn't just mean leaving life. It's also one of the journeys of the workshop. It's very intense. It's how do I leave this workshop? And how do I go back into the world that Lydia was talking about? How do I re-enter that world? And if I'm changed, how can I affect change in that world if I wish? And so the elder really is, in a way, you are the elder, and we have to reflect on that. But it's like the hardest thing of all, is reflecting on the very thing that you are. Whereas the child is far enough away for you to go, well, I'll either dive in there or I won't. And also I forgive myself for being completely stupid, as we do for sort of a week of it, in all kinds of wonderful ways. The adolescent can be more painful because in a way we've clambered out of adolescence without killing ourselves. And now, it frightens us when it reappears, when we feel rejected by somebody we love, or we feel jealous, all these powerful. So emotions is another part, the exploration of emotion. The emotion is at the very heart of the artist, whether it be music or painting or drama, the emotions. So these fundamental emotions are explored as part of this world. So the framework, in a way, is a very technical thing, but it's also, I think, a very, very useful thing. The journey of you for the child, the adolescent, and the elder is, I'd say, at the very center of you as an artist, what I would call your authentic voice, growing your authentic voice. And my time spent with you, if you do this workshop, is about that. It's about growing your authentic voice. And again, although it might seem a very amorphous stuff, what I usually try to talk about when I teach people is there is tools, the tools you've got, and the tools you'll be learning, but mostly you can get them on the internet these days. Don't bother spending too much money on that. Skills, and skill, my job as a teacher is to work with what you've got and improve that skill, you know, but also with each other. So the peer learning is a very important part of the process, the way that you help each other sharpen each other's tools, so, you know, and use them. But the third stage is really where real learning happens, which is about your attitudes and your behavior. Yeah, your attitudes to things and your behavior. So I use a couple of basic tools always, which an artist uses, which is provocation and evocation. A provocation is you provoke people, and it's basically, we don't ask people to laugh, we provoke them to laugh. And in that, we see how they are. That reveals your attitudes and your behavior. Evocation is an imaginative realm which affects you, which brings about feelings and images and thoughts that maybe you know you've had, but you've sometimes ignored. By creating evocation, again, we see your attitudes and your behavior. The last thing that we work with, I as a teacher work with, is the quality of you. And we must never ignore that. It's basically, Alice is different from Claire in every way, except she's similar. And it's the small differences of similarities that make all the difference. And so the quality of you bring into the room, every part of you, and that is found in the child. The moment you were born, your mum would say, gosh, she's a little bit like that, or he's a little bit like that. And in the arts, we know that all the time. We often choose to ignore it. In places sometimes culturally like England, we tend to go, no, you're just a function of society. You're a job, but you're not. Yes. And so Marilyn Monroe had the Marylandness of Marilyn. Absolutely, and still does, strangely enough, amplified out. And so we have to work with that quality, and that is tricky sometimes. But so those four parts is what we're working with. But the attitude and behavior is absolutely significant, because the attitude of, I can't be bothered to turn up on time to the workshop, that can affect things, obviously, or the opposite. I am so rigorous at this, I've got to apply myself, I've got to, like Lydia, had to write a whole book about this, which is fantastic. And so it's a very holistic training in these different areas. And obviously time is limited, and therefore it's intense from 10 o'clock. The last thing that we use was referred to as a thing called the Navajo University, which is basically a circle of people. I've been fortunate to work in 74 different countries, cultures, all kinds of things. And you will find the circle is the oldest form of human tribal community that exists. But in that circle, you see a lowering of the hierarchy, and there's no beginning and no end. And so I've taken something when I studied with, or spent time, should I say, with a Native American tribe, which was Navajo process, where they'd say if they had a problem in any community, they'd just get together. And, you know, if they didn't know where the sweets were, the 5-year-old would probably be able to tell them. If they didn't know where the water is, you know, the person who used to know where the water is would be an older person, perhaps. So most things in the arts, in fact, most things in life aren't rocket science. Otherwise, they'd be rocket science. And so if you have a group, use that group as your library, as your university. And in that place, you'll find great wisdom. But also, it does something which is fundamental in all of this, which is that we are social animals. All we really want is relationships. We don't want money, we don't want any of that. What we really want is relationships with each other, the world around us, and ourselves. Focus on that, and you will be creative. So the Navajo University always goes back to the idea that whether we like it or not, we are going to have relationships, improving those relationships. And I don't mean necessarily being polite, I mean being civil, improving those relationships with each other. You'll suddenly find greater creativity happens. And underneath all of this, I suppose, is what I've done always in theatre, was ensemble work, is I really don't believe in individualism. I believe in individuals. Individualism, I think, is hallucination, the belief that we're separate. We're not. We're entirely connected to each other. So the work, I think, in this round is I'm going to emphasize a bit more the nature of the community and the work on the community to bring out the individual rather than the individualism. And I think that's one little tinker I want to make, which was there in the last week. And we saw the struggle of that. In the West, we have huge problems with the idea of community now, and it's going to destroy our society. So I believe it's a very important part of this process. So that'll probably get a bit more emphasis than maybe last time. So I hope you hear that I'm learning all the time from all the participants in this. So that's a very broad outline, a lot there. Maybe, have you got any questions you'd like to ask about that, Amy or Rue?
Hi. I'm just going back to the individualism thing. I'm not really sure what individualism is. Like I feel like I know what it means to be an individual, but I've never heard the term individualism.
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose it's the belief that that society is built around the individual at some level. The community is built around you as an individual, and you're more important than the community. That's I think maybe the thrust about it. A culture that believes that the individual is more important than the community, and I think it's quite glaringly obvious that's not true. It's just not true. If it was so, then you'd be able to feed yourself without having to meet with anybody. So on a very simple level, the obsession with, and it's a very good tool for selling you things, to say, we're going to sell you these jeans and they're going to make you look great. And you know it's not true, but it's very good for capitalism. But what I'm not saying is that you aren't an individual, and your individuality is to do with the quality of you, your wisdom, the elder in you, the child in you, and the adolescent. Does that make sense in some way?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's but the way you go to work at that, you find, as we know in theatre, by playing with others, it reveals ourselves more, and we lose ourselves in the group to find ourselves in a way. Any other questions? It's a big question, that one.
Hey there.
Amy.
I'd like to just ask you a question. I've been really enjoying listening to your description of everything that's involved, and like lots of resonances sparking. But I'm actually listening in from a car, so I've not really been able to scribble down maybe some notes or things that I might normally do.
Yeah.
But it sounds really exciting and kind of inspiring, and yeah, sparking lots of different connections. But I guess I know this might not be an easy question to answer, but what would be really cool is to just get like a little bit of a flavor of what would a day sort of look like, or like how much of the work is sort of physically working together, or is it much more discursive, or yeah, just to kind of imagine, like, I know there probably isn't exactly a typical day, but something in that territory.
No, I'd say it is, Amy. It is. It's very. It's spread out, and we always start with a reflection. It can often be half an hour. You know, try not to let it be longer than half an hour. Sometimes it is, which is a physical thing in the circle. But the very act of sitting on the floor in the circle and watching people's bodies as they speak is in itself the beginning of the warm up of the body, the work on the body, the way of the body. Yeah. Then usually there's a meditation, which is a practice which is basically to do with 4 basic forces. I say a small force, a changing force, a light, soft changing force, a strong changing force. So the light changing ones like rain, fire. This is a meditation with the hands, but to do with the whole body. So it starts with very subtle movements. And then we work on things like elan, which is to do with contact with the ground, suspension, good energy and pleasure. And we work very technically on that, as Alice and Claire will probably tell you, and Korina and Simon, is I'm pretty relentless on going, okay, now more contact. Let's think about the contact more. So it's focusing the mind away from thoughts, more on focusing on being aware of certain conditions. One of the things I try to teach through that class every day, I call it, is raising your awareness of your awareness, okay? By making contact with the ground each day, in the same way that a musician tunes their instrument and listens to that tuning. It's the act of learning to listen which is really what you're doing with your body, and that raises your awareness of your awareness. Then focus. The use of focus is very important. In our modern world, focus has really been reduced. We are a distracted world who give attention to things rather than focus on things. Learning, when you learn with a great dancer or a musician or an actor, they have focus. They can focus on 2 words for a whole morning, you know. So that's very physical, that work. That's often very, very physical. And it's to do with also work on breath. Yeah. Then each thing, for instance, the work on preparation of giving and receiving, yes, learning to give and receive in the body, yes. We work on struggle, pushing and pulling. Basically struggle, if you look carefully at all struggle in the world, there's only 3 things happening. One is pushing. When you get out of that car, you're going to push that door open. So you'll push it closed, okay? You pull. Okay, you pull things to you. You'll see babies doing this. So we work on pushing and pulling. And the third part of it, which we never must forget, is being present in that pushing and pulling. Okay, very important. When you go to the theatre, you're basically present in watching actors push and pull each other on stage. Okay, that being present is difficult sometimes because pushing and pulling is a pain in the ass. Basically, to see it all day long, you go, oh, God, you know. But then we learn different levels of pushing and pulling. There's 3 levels in the body. There's basically soft, firm, and strong to the bone. Yeah, learning to do the different levels of pushing and pulling reveals different levels of emotion, and that affects different parts of the brain, basically. So a lot of the physical work is also connected to the neuroscience of the way the brain works. So I would say, to answer your question simply, I would hope, and probably the others would be able to say, to tell better, there is a good balance of everything. There is theory, but not too much. But every day it's rooted in skills and exercise that are transferable and you can take out and use to teach, if you're a teacher, to use to create better, to be a better performer. They're all very practical things. Does that help in any way?
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. I guess it sparks another question, if that's all right. I don't want to dominate time too much. But so I would be coming to it primarily with the practice as a director rather than a performer, although I generally have always kind of worked with the way I learn things is by doing it first. But sometimes I feel insecure about the doing of it when I'm not, you know, as skilled a performer as people who do that every day. Does it feel like that's a kind of an okay place to be coming to that work from, or does it generally tend to be quite skilled performers? Or
No. I put simply, I think, and I think Claire's nodding, is it's good that you have a rudimentary still of obviously your body, and that probably if you've directed, you've probably done some performing, but that's not the basis of it. It's meant to be a practice which comes from different backgrounds. People come from different backgrounds, and quite the opposite, it's the enrichment of it because people come from different backgrounds. So for directing, for instance, the job of learning to look at critical thinking again, what is it? How is it? Why is it? Now, probably already you have a great deal going on. Another performer who might be a dancer, maybe not, doesn't have that so much. The use of those 2 things beginning to work in the room creates greater enrichment. Does that make sense? But also, I think the thing about, I mean, I was a terrible director. I'm probably still a very mediocre director. I don't know. But I think the thing about I was a very good performer, you know, from being a child. But the skill of directing is such a holistic and complex thing. Observation is one of the most important parts of it. And so I hope you'll find that often one of my practices is to observe quite deeply, not judging people, again, or criticizing people, but observing their behavior. And attunement to that observation is a very important part of an artist's job, a director, absolutely. But the other thing we teach, for instance, is I teach directing during it as a leadership thing. I kind of call it the alchemy of leadership, which is basically about directive behavior. Could you do this? Could you do that? Use it too much, it becomes dictatorial, being aware of not using that in an inappropriate way. Coaching. And coaching is standing at the side of a person going, I know where you are. So when you're a performer and you're a director, you know about performing, you might say, how about trying it this way? That's different. Facilitating is something that we do a fair amount of training in during it, that people have to co-facilitate each other. And this is to do with light, firm, strong. So go on stage, or how about you going to say direct, indirect, and from behind. Yeah, you know, the English are very direct about things all the way, in a strange sort of way, and then suddenly they're from behind. Yes, so these different things make it so you have to have all three. So facilitating, and then open question, closed questions, and half open. The most creative questions are the half open questions, half open, half closed. And so I would hope, as a director, I'm sure you're very experienced and probably a very knowledgeable director, I hope you would find your skills would be refreshed, which is important, but also they might be enlarged as well, you know what I mean? So I would hope that you would learn things as a performer, because basically we're bodies in space, but also you would learn some more as a director. You know, maybe Alice and Claire could jump in here a little bit about this thing of using what you have and then growing it a bit.
Yeah, I can speak on particularly the body. It felt like every day I was present in the body, and so that is a part of the training, and it gave me an opportunity to step into the role of director at certain points of time. So I came from more of an experience as a deviser, performer. I directed one show that was completely remote. So it gave me an opportunity to step into something that was new and explore what that was like. And also taking on more facilitation as well. And noticing from the group dynamics, there was an array of experiences that came through, from a really strong musician wanting to come into a more embodied practice, and I'm sure Claire can speak on her experiences, so I'll put a pin in it there.
Okay, great, thank you so much, Alice.
I think what was to support what both David and Alice have said, there's so many various kind of experienced people there who have done so many different things, that it seems that you take what you need from this environment, and working with all these different people who have many different skills and experiences. It's learning from them and then taking what is useful for you to be able to grow, either as a performer or whatever other work that you do in your relationships with the world and the people that you work with. What I found very liberating was the fact that at some point, if you need to, you can step out and just observe. And I found that to be very valuable to as opposed to being always inside and not seeing how it all works. And I would have thought that as the director, that might be something that would be very valuable, to be able to do that, and yet to have the freedom and to be in a safe environment, to be able to do that, to be for people to be able to allowed to watch and observe how the workshop works and how the group works.
Yeah, thanks.
One thing that I want to add in there is that the exercises in themselves, the meditations, the reflections, the 5 stages of creative practice, particularly the reflection and preparation, they create the cohesion among the group that has that sense of belonging, no matter what sort of like stream of artistry you're coming from. So you'll find that within the practices that you are doing, that lays the groundwork for those crossovers, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Alice. Yes, I think the one lucky thing I had, first off, I didn't study in England myself. I studied in Europe, as in France, and, at Le Coq and De Creux and various other places. So my training has been more in and then traveling so much in the universalities. And so I've tried always to teach things which are true when I've been in Argentina, in China, the same. And so I hope that from that universality, whilst it's very rigorous and robust about it, these fundamental human things, you can take it into your own work in whatever direction you wish to take. It's not about telling you what the stories you should tell are, it's just trying to get you to be able to tell them better. I think that's very, very important for me. It's a framework of skill that means you're a better artist when you leave. You know.
Totally. If I can just lean in for a second, just because I'm going to have to run back to rehearsal in a minute, and I'd just love to share something briefly as well. I think what's unique, what I was struck by Alchemy last year, for example, is how, just to agree as well with everything that's been said as well, is how experiential it is. And how driven through that, and how it matches the experiential with the framework. Often there's a separate, I think creativity is such an amphibious thing, and I wouldn't say that alchemy is for just actors, or just there was an extraordinary group of people that came in and were finding resonances on a personal level, on a social level, on a creative and skill-based or professional level as well. And I think that's one of the most extraordinary aspects of it, is that how does one stay inside of a framework of organization, for example, but not start trying to manage something, cut off your heart from it, or cut off your body from it and your experience of it. And like you were saying, Amy, as well, obviously, a director often takes it, needs the experience of it as well. And so there's often so much of it is about that cycle between roles, the cycle of the collective, the cycle of the ensemble. And I think, much like you're saying, David, they're actually that heightens the kind of extremity of the individual experiences as well, in the sense that one is sharing this with 10 or 12 or 13 others as well. Yeah, so I wish I would love to stay more and talk more. Korina and I are free anytime for all more conversations, as well as is David, and I'm sure that there are lots of other conversations around it that are maybe more logistical and practical about how to do it, etc., which is equally part of it, and is a really important part of it as well, that we are here to help and to support. I think, reflecting back even on where Alchemy started last year, one of the things we want to do with this is to make it a learning experience on an organizational level as well, that is human-centered, and that is about us as a group, and us coming together. And that means that, from mine and Korina's part, as we hold the space and organize the space, is that we are really here. We're not just saying we're here and then we'll get back to you via email and 2 weeks later, whatever. Is that we want to actually to do that. So all questions and we're here to help people that want to do it to be able to do it, and that comes down to finding accommodation or travel, all of these things as well. So I suppose I would love to leave it there. I have to run, but I'll leave that conversation.
Great, thank you, Simon, so much. Yeah, I just wanted to really celebrate both Korina and Simon did a great job hosting it last time, and so we try to make it both rigorous, but also very a beautiful, what I say is a beautiful experience. And Athens is a beautiful place to be in, and also very appropriate to go back to the fundamentals of theatre in that place. I suppose just one last thing I wanted to say, Amy. I suppose I've been very privileged to have had 45 years in this business and also come from an arts and science family. And so I've directed and done all these things. So often the one thing I do have, I suppose, I've experienced many of the things that younger people are going through because I've kind of done them myself. I'm not saying very well necessarily, but I've learned a huge amount by doing that. And I think a lot of people that have studied with me say, I teach directing at East 15, for instance, and various other places. and design. So I often get where people are coming from because I've actually done it myself. You know what I mean? And that seems, at least that's the feedback I've had from people. I seem to understand it from their perspective as well, the struggle they're having. So is there any more questions you want to ask? The one thing I'd say about these sessions is even if you don't come, I hope you get something from it. That's the important thing. And just sitting and talking on a Sunday about these things and seeing you and hearing your thoughts is really great as part of what I would call the alchemy experience. Claire?
I will second that, because that is something that I was going to say, that even though I've gone through the experience myself, and just being part of this meeting today has been extremely valuable in terms of allowing me to reflect of what's been happening throughout the year since the workshop, and just hearing everything again, it kind of just makes so much more sense, and it's been great just being part of this Zoom meeting as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great. So if you've got any more questions, if not, we'll probably wrap up there. Please ask. Or also, I'm contactable, and Korina and Simon are at the first point of contact, obviously. But if there's any more questions, or you want to have another chat, I'm always available. If we can get together, that'd be good.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You take care, Emmy. Thank you so much.
Just a wrap up from me as well. I mean, you can find all the information on the relevant documents that we have uploaded. Of course, I made a mistake. I put it on the chat. It's from the 18th of June till the 29th of July, the workshop. It's 6 weeks. The first 5 weeks are held in a dance studio by the north suburbs of Athens, which is how far away is from the center?
Half an hour, isn't it?
Yeah, it's half an hour, depending where you live. I mean, if you decide to come, it's better, I think, to live around the area of the north suburbs. But if you like to live in the center, then there are trains around, but don't expect like a very punctual and perfect transportation system.
I mean, like London, then, just like London, then.
So yeah, it depends if you want to spend more time in your transportation, which will be an experience as well, because David uses everything from your experiences, from your dreams to the travel to the studio. But anyway, and yeah, the 6th week is in a theater, in a very in a young theater in a way. The last years does a lot of contemporary, and it's in the heart of the theater world in Athens. It's called Poria Theater, which means marching theater, which is like moving forward. And every place we are, it's like a family. So this is the sense you have to feel it. We are a family here. This is how we live in Greece in a way. We believe everything is family. So this is how we would treat you as our family. And it's the same for the studio for the 5 weeks, and for the theater as well. People are very warm here and very welcoming. And as Simon said, any questions, please directly email us or David. We are here for you. And yeah, I don't know if Amy and Rue have any question now, but please feel free to ask anything later or now.
Great.
It's not really a question. I just want to say something, if that's okay. I just, like similar to what was said before, I just want to say thank you. I feel like I've been in your vicinity quite a lot recently. So I'm like, it's nice to just hear you talk about your practice, because I feel like I understand your way of working a lot more after seeing 3 of your shows at East 15 as well. Like, I think it's really helped me kind of refine why I would want to come and do this as well, and I think what I will gain from it as a creative. So yeah, thank you.
You're very, very welcome, Ruth. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, great. And thank you all for coming, Amy, and India for supporting as well, and Korina for hosting us, and Claire.
Yes, thank you so much, David. And of course, India is here as well for any questions by the half of the ensemble and David Glass Ensemble. Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, David.
Thank you, and it's been great to see you all again.
Bye. Bye.
2, 3, 4.
So the idea of alchemy, of the extraordinary, is taking a number of different threads of the teaching I've done over many years and embedding it in basically the 5-stage creative practice, which has preparation, origination, organization, manifestation, and reflection as its heart. We also explored the child, the adolescent, and the elder, and the use of the Navajo University Circle to integrate the knowledge that was already in the room.
The last 6 weeks have been, I think, one of the most creative periods of my life and the most kind of concentrated creative period. Completely lost the sense of time somehow. It was quite exhausting to do the workshop in the sense that I felt for me that I was diving really deep into emotions, experiences, everything that makes me, my history, my stories.
Finding our voice through going back to our child, and the play of that, and also the adolescent and the madness of the adolescent, really spending time in those places and discovering ourselves, you know, who I am through that. It's released me, it's reminded me of the performer that I am, you know.
They've been extraordinary.
For me, it was amazing because it has kind of reawakened the actor in me, and kind of being able to be on a stage and be in a theatre. It's amazing. It was a wonderful experience, so thank you for that.
Can you be and say what you really want to say, and then how to translate that into your work and to still be yourself was something that I found special in this process, that I didn't lose my voice and I went more into my voice.
That level of amount of preparation and reflection is very rarely done in training. And I think a lot of them said so. It was that, the lowering of judgment, the learning to give and receive, to find pleasure in play, to discover elan again, and then to reflect quite deeply on different aspects of both their lives and the world that we're in at the moment.
David is a great teacher. He's very generous, he's very provocative, but he's very generous and he's very kind. So it's a really nice mix, and you soon learn what are the things that you need to take seriously and what other things are there to make you think about something or feel about something, and then kind of have a dialogue with yourself in your own head.
David is he is like an anarchist, I suppose. He's refreshing. He is impetuous and provocative and can drive you crazy, but he also is a hugely generous spirit.
He's very inspiring, and he has seen me.
Generally, it's about trying to find their creative voice, I think, an authentic creative voice from them, and then how can they use the tools and the framework to help them to do that.
Because it was explained so clearly and we had the actual practice of it over the 6 weeks, I think it's going to be a breeze after.
It's really brought everything into really sharp kind of practical focus, which is great for whenever I go back home. I've got like lots more tools in my tool bag to use, so I'm delighted.
For me, it opened a completely different universe. I've done Devised before, but integrating meditation in the beginning, integrating the reflection, integrating the story and the story building So for me, it kind of offer a completely different way to look at devised theatre. That it's not only the improvisation and then that there is a specific structure to madness and to improvisation.
The preparation is they're incredibly clear tools that I can use myself in my own autonomous practice, but also take and share them with other artists that I work with.
It is creating, talking about that safe space to go to or the secure space to go to insecure places, and that's definitely what I'm feeling, that I'm taking with me the desire to go out and make things.
I found that what I have experienced in this time with David and with the rest of the cohort has been something that I feel like I can really use practically, that I can take home and begin to start work on that right away.